Awesome. How epic is that intro? I know you guys have seen it quite a few times today, but it's totally cool, hey? That's an advert I don't mind to see before a movie. Get you quite excited. It's much better than the buy now, but if you buy two, for definitely a higher price. So welcome everybody, and everybody still finding their seats. For those who don't know me, my name is Carike Botha. I work for iSolve Business Solutions. Hey, precious. For those who've seen me talk quite a few times, thanks for coming to my talk again. You really flatter me. I work for a company called iSolve Business Solutions. I'm also a Microsoft MVP. Please follow me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with the community and have interesting conversations, whether it be about AI, whether it be about women in tech, anything that tickles your fancy, I'm happy to discuss. But today, we will be talking about building a custom agent with vectorized text in Azure AI Search. So just a show of hands, and I'm so happy that I can actually see you in the seats. So just a show of hands, how many of you have built a custom agent with Copilot Studio, just out of interest? Okay, that's good. I'm talking to the right people. I was concerned if everybody raised your hands. I was like, oh, okay, my talk's done. And then how many of you have played around with Azure AI Search? Oh, great. No, I'm really at the right place. Thank you for joining my talk. I hope this is entertaining. Right, so let's start with the initial problem, just with regards to agents and bots in general. So have you ever asked a chatbot something and it just looked a little lost? And you were met with this response: I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to help with that. I've done that many times. And I get so frustrated, especially because GPT is working really amazing. I love using ChatGPT. I use it every single day. In the beginning, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but I often find that as an IT tech specialist, I am a slower adopter than the rest of the world who isn't necessarily in tech, because of you're thinking of security, you're thinking of what can this do with my data? So I'm usually a slow adopter to anything new. And in the beginning, I was like, ChatGPT, what can I use this for? And I started asking around. Generally, people were like asking it for recipes, fitness instructions, like work out a workout structure for me for the week. But then I started seeing the value actually from a Power BI colleague. And he was like, this thing is amazing. It can write my SQL queries for me. I was like, for reals? You must show me how you prompt that. So I was very excited, and I started using that then for tech to see what it can do, and I got really excited. However, and I'll go into that a little bit later, I am still bummed that it cannot do PowerPoint presentations the way I want to, so my job is still to create funky-looking PowerPoint presentations, darn it. But I'm often met with I'm sorry, I'm not sure how I can help with that, especially in Copilot Studio. So that's why I incorporated or found that Azure AI Search just helps build that and make it a little more clever. So the reason Copilot Studio is a little bit or feels a little bit dumb is because it's making use of what we call keyword search, right? So it's very similar how you would go Control F in a file, right? Versus with a chatbot that uses vectorization, it's like the friend that gets you, right? We've all seen this meme so many times, and you can put whatever you want in there. Today, it's the Control F versus the friend who understands you. And that's really what vectorization brings to the table. So, like I've mentioned, keyword search is like hitting Control F in a document. You only get the exact matches. And is it because I'm moving that my screen is flickering? No? Okay, I'll just stand very still. Okay. So vector search, what vector search means is it's like asking a friend, and they might not repeat what it is that you ask them, but they do understand what you mean, and therefore they can answer you. So that's what we're trying to achieve with agents, with chatbots, is that you can have a natural conversation with it as you would with a human being, and they understand what it is that you're asking, versus like taking it word for word and possibly misunderstanding what it is that you're asking. So it's not just matching the words, it's actually taking a few words and understanding, in like it will show in the next slide. If you take this little snippet of a dog, a canine, and a puppy, essentially they're all the same thing, right? So some, depending on where you are in the world, you would refer to it as a dog or you would refer to it as a canine. So vectorization helps your content, or whatever is in your content, vectorization helps so that the chatbot understands better and gives a better response versus just a keyword search. Don't get me wrong, keyword searching is important, and you can often build a solution where you can build a hybrid approach, where it sometimes uses keywords or sometimes uses vectorization. So, okay, so I've already said what I wanted to say about that one. So just getting a bit into the technical piece of it, and I'll show you a demo, so we'll go into the demo a little bit later. So this is just typically what a JSON snippet looks like when you vectorize your data within Azure AI Search. So it'll obviously put the vector in a field bracket, and these are the properties that you need to specify. It obviously needs to have a name, it has to have a type. The dimension is the embedding, OpenAI embedding model that you're going to be using. And then obviously the vector search profile, whether it's going to be handle nearest neighbor search. There's a few options in there. I'm not going to cover those options in detail today. So let's have a look a little bit at the Azure AI Search architecture. So typically, you would send your data with Azure AI Search. And what I'll do in the demo today is I'll take you through a step-by-step, because I just love how, especially your larger companies, when they are really excited about the functionality that they're bringing to you, they go, you can install this in 3 easy steps. And then you go 15 steps down the line, you're like, this was no 3 easy steps. Because they hardly ever tell you about the prerequisites that you need to install before you get to the easy 1, 2, 3. Right? So I want to take you in the demo through the steps that you need to do first to get to the point where you actually add your Azure AI Search as a connector in your Copilot so it can be utilized. But just talking and breaking it down a little bit, what you would do is you would have a container that maybe contains some data in Azure. It can be blob storage or however you store your information in Azure. Then that gets indexed, right? So you would need to have, you would say import and vectorize, and that would get indexed and vectorized as well. And then what you would do is once you've set up also your OpenAI in Azure as well, and these are all services that you need to activate. So imagine someone hearing the marketing rah-rah going like, yay, I can build my own bot with Azure AI Search, but they didn't realize or factor in the costs of the services that comes with Azure, right? Those are things that we constantly need to think of, especially if you're taking something to client. And I think that's what's happening a lot especially from a C-suite level. They get to see all this awesome functionality, go, we have to implement that. But then when you come back with the cost, they're like, no, we don't want that. We just want the functionality. It's like, no, you have to realize that it actually does cost money. So, but yeah, this is the Azure AI Search architecture. Kind of ingest data, you generate the document embeddings, you add to your index, you create the vector. And once the vectorization is set up and ready, then you can actually start using the search, right? So I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like. Also, because I'm in a room who hasn't used Copilot Studio a lot, this slide is absolutely mandatory. Just building agents in Copilot Studio, I'm sure by now, and I mean, I say this a lot, and here I am talking about AI, but I'm sure all of us are so AI'd out because it's just AI everywhere. And but yeah, it has become literally the essence of everything that we do. Agents is the big thing. I mean, I haven't heard the word agents as much since the last time I watched Matrix, and they are re-airing those now, so catch it on DSTV. So it's so interesting. I actually recently watched The Matrix, and I was like, when I watched it, I can't recall that the movie was about this. There's actually a romantic swing in it, and I can't recall that was it. I just remember the numbers and the agents, and I was like, wow, this is quite interesting. So go rewatch those movies that you watched as a child. It's very insightful as an adult. iRobot still freaks me out, though, I have to say. Anyways, back to the conversation. Sorry, Copilots and conversational AI. So obviously within Copilot Studio, for those who don't know, Copilot Studio is the low-code, no-code kind of approach or tool to use if you want to build agents, bots, and things for the company. It is a licensed product as well. And then obviously the Azure part of it with Azure Foundry, that's when you want to work more with generative AI. So just understanding the difference, like Copilot Studio is more for your low-code approaches, and Azure AI Foundry is more for your complex solutions and more custom things that you want to do. Copilot Studio, custom, but not so much. Okay. So obviously we've got agents, and what we can do in Copilot Studio is obviously expand on the existing Copilots that lives within the Microsoft space. So I always laugh when I had this conversation with Rudy yesterday, is when people talk about Copilot, I always go, which one? You know, because people mention Copilot so loosely, and Microsoft was that very friendly to all of the divisions, saying that you get a Copilot, you get a Copilot, and you get a Copilot. So everybody in the space, Azure, Power Platform, Microsoft 365, they all got Copilots, right? And here we are as the consumer sitting back. We're using Copilot, but which one? So that happens a lot. So just understanding that there are multiple Copilots. Within Copilot Studio, you can expand on all of those ones. You can expand on the Copilot for Microsoft 365, but also the one that you get in Biz Apps or Power Platform, or even the, as it says there, other Microsoft Copilots, because there's just so many. Not to be confused at all with GitHub Copilot, right, which is focused specifically for developers. So, yeah, there's a lot of Copilots out there, but it's a lot of fun because you get to just play around with each of them, see the functionality that it brings to the table in each of the different silos. What I love about what AI and specifically agents and the low-code platform has brought to the table is it opened up tech for everyone. Tech is no longer just for the IT silo. It's for your finance. It's for your HR. It's for your legal, right? Hey? So, yeah. It's literally like anyone can build agents these days, and they can really make themselves more productive. However, I don't encourage going to your job and going like, everybody gets a Copilot. I do not encourage that at all. So with that, and those who know me, I don't like a lot of slides. I do like demos. So we are going to jump right into the demo. And in this demo, we'll cover, like I've mentioned, the Copilot Studio element with Azure AI Search, but I'm also going to build a custom agent where I'm going to add SharePoint as the knowledge source, because I want to show you the difference in just how Azure AI Search has made things so much easier, and you feel less frustrated as a tech person with the Copilot Studio and building an agent. And yeah, so once the data, you'll see with Azure AI Search Service, once the data is indexed, we can connect to it as a connector. We can build our custom agent, and we can get some search results. That's quite neat. So with that said, I'm just quickly going to change my screen here. Let's go ahead and do that. Now it's hopping to the right one. Let's start here. Okay. So anyone who's never been inside of Azure before? Okay, great. So at least you're all familiar with Azure. Great. So from where to start, right, is if you now get the requirement that you need to build a custom agent and it needs to utilize Azure AI Search, the first things that you would need to do is obviously you need to set up creating a resource, creating a what do you call this? I'll tell you just now. A resource group. There we go. My English just escaped me for a second. Whew. It's that time of the afternoon. I hope you're all still with me. I know it's after lunch. I am in the graveyard shift, but stick with me. I'll make you famous. No, I'm just kidding. So first of all, you start with the resource group, right? So think of a resource group as your solution. So if you're a developer and you work in Visual Studio, this will be your solution file that just keeps everything together. So you'll start with the resource group. I have, for the sake of the demo and for time, I've already created a resource group, which I've called Escape Joburg Resource Group, and I gave it the date of today. So obviously, this becomes your folder inside of Azure, where you would put everything that you want inside of this resource group. You'll start building in here. So the 2 or 3 things that you would need inside of your resource group to kind of set yourself up to have Azure AI Search working the way it should. And because we want to store our information in the blob storage is you're going to need a search service, the Azure AI Search service. You're going to need a storage account, and we'll have some containers in there. And you're going to have to create an open AI service. So those are the three things that you're going to need when you are setting up this environment for yourself. Okay, so we'll start with the search service. I just want to take you through the steps so you can see what are the options that I chose when creating that. So we'll start with the search service, AI search, because this is often things that they also, like, just for personally, when going through documentation, this is often the things that don't get explained enough, or in the steps when they go, you can install this in 3 easy steps. I'm already on step 5. So what you need to understand is when you are creating a search service, obviously you need your subscription. It's going to ask you for a resource group where it needs to store it. And then it's going to ask you for a service name. That's still obvious. Location. This one is very important. So when playing with the embeddings and going into Azure AI Foundry, it is also very important to see which models is available in which region, because there's some limitations that still exist per region. So it's very important to understand when you set this up, what location it is that you're choosing. I just kept it at Central US because that's the least limiting one. But we have to consider it. I mean, if we want to have something in the South Africa range or locations, we have to see what the limitations are and what it is that we can be building. Okay. Then just from a pricing tier, for this example, just went basic. It all depends on how much you plan to store. So this is just how much information you plan to have searched with the search service. So remembering that we are building a search service. So I usually just choose basic because it is the cheapest one. Okay, but you can always go higher, and you can see that it gets more expensive the higher you go. So I would choose basic there. I'm just going to go back here quickly. And then that's it. So setting up the search service really is as simple as that. Obviously understanding that whatever pricing tier you select, that has a cost that goes with it. So I'm just going to close this because we already created our search service. The next one that we had to create, if I just go back to my resource group, is obviously we needed to create. I suggest creating it in the order that I mentioned. So start with your search service. The next is your storage account. Lastly, do your OpenAI service, because the OpenAI service is going to ask about the search service as well as the storage account, right? So you start with your search service, then you go with your storage account. So once again, very similar. If I just show you the steps for storage account quickly. So let's create a new one. So here you've obviously got a lot of options. Once again, you choose your resource group, you give your storage account a name. The region, I just leave it as whatever it defaults to. At this stage, it doesn't matter. The performance, I just kept at standard. And then the redundancy, there are a few options here, but I just leave it as its default. So this is all good. Let's just go next. I want to see what the next step is. That's still fine. Fine, encryption. Yeah, so just the first one is the most important. The rest you can leave as is. I've kept it as all of the defaults, and you can just go review and create. So then you've got your storage account. So once you've got your storage account, that's all good and well. But now within the storage account, you need to create a container, because that's the thing that's actually going to contain the data that you want. So to go to there, you would click on containers. Okay. And this is where you would then obviously add your containers. So what I've created for this demo is I've created 2 containers because I wanted to show you the combination of being able to, when we built the chatbot, that it's smart enough to pick up on both the containers and kind of understand the context between the 2. Okay. So what I have is I've got a container, and to create a container is very simple. So you would click on add container. You would simply just give it a name. The advanced settings I just left as default. And then once a container is created, from here this is where you would add your information, right? So from here, I just chose to upload. So the container is called CVs. So I've just uploaded a bunch of sample CVs that I have. And then if I just go back, I just uploaded a mental health document that I got off of the World Health Organization, just talking about mental health at work. So the sample that I want to show you today is how it relates, because remember I said vectorization helps you identify keywords that is associated with a certain word, because it understands now that these things kind of mean the same thing. So if I talk about stress, it understands burnout, and those kind of things are associated with stress. And similar with CVs, we call it CVs, but other people call it resumes, right? And it being clever enough to understand the difference between that. Okay? So once we've got our containers, we've got our files uploaded, all is good to go. Then the last thing that we need to do is we need to create and set up an Azure OpenAI service. Why the Azure OpenAI service is because we're going to use the embeddings model that's found in the OpenAI service to kind of help us understand this vectorized text that has been built in Azure AI Search. Okay, so when we click on the OpenAI service, I just want to take you through the steps of creating one quickly. Okay, let's open AI. There we go. I do still have it open there. So when creating a new OpenAI service, just the things that it's asking for, obviously a resource group, once again asking for region, you give it a name, and then you choose your pricing tier here. At this time, there's just one option available. And then by clicking next, there's some important fields here. Let's just call it blah. Hopefully that's available. Let's put the date. Okay, happiness. Okay, so that's all fine. So there's not a lot of things that you need to set up at this stage for the Azure OpenAI service. Cool, so that's happiness. So that once you've gone through that steps and your Azure OpenAI service has been created, then we are good to go. Then the last thing that we want to do is now we've got our Azure AI Search service, we've got our OpenAI service, and we've got our containers. So what we want to do is in the search service, so I suggest also when you do your naming, I prefer to keep the what it was that I created in the name, because then it's just easier to find them, especially if you're not familiar with the icons. Okay. So once we're in here, in the search service, you see here that you've got an option to import and vectorize the data. Okay, this is why we needed to create the containers with the information first. So now that we have that, we can click on import and vectorize the data. And then because we've created a blob storage, that is the one that we will choose. But as you can see, there's many other options. If it was a database that you wanted to consume and vectorize, you could have easily plugged into a database here. Okay, but we're going to go with the blob storage. And then we've got obviously RAG and multimodal RAG. So the multimodal RAG is a little bit more complex, but you can do a lot more with it. We're just going to stick to the normal RAG where we're just going to analyze and vectorize the text. We're not necessarily into the images and all of that. So here's a few things and steps that you need to follow. So obviously we choose our storage account that we want to set this up for. And then once we choose the storage account, it will give us a list of the containers. You can just do one container at a time. It will index and vectorize that container, right? So it's very important that when you have a container, I suggest having containers for things that make sense put together. So I've got the CVs all in one container and the mental health in its own, right? So especially if you're thinking about maybe HR or legal documents, just keeping them clustered in things in a silo that makes sense. So then you would choose your container, whichever one that you want to do this for. The parsing mode, you have a few options in here. I just choose the default. So I stick to the default. You can enable deletion tracking and authenticate using a managed identity. I left that off for now for the demo example. Excuse me. Then you could click next. Once you've clicked next, it should take you to the vectorize your text step. Come on, internet. There we go. I was getting like a little bit of a sweat there. Live demos, there's nothing like it, right? Like you don't realize the pressure when live demo starts just going like, I don't want to today. Okay, cool. So once we have connected to our data, now we get to vectorizing our text. So here you obviously can choose the kind. It's either Azure OpenAI or the AI Foundry Hub catalog models, but we're just going to stick with OpenAI, your subscription defaults, and then you choose your OpenAI service. Okay, so because we already created our OpenAI service, now it's available in this drop-down list. So obviously this is very simple because I'm doing one demo. I created one OpenAI service. As someone who maintains this level of things in Azure, it is important that naming conventions is obviously very important so that the administrator who deals with this also know which things they are choosing. Okay. Then the model deployment. This is something that I'll show you just now. So just before I jump into this, when you create or set up an Azure OpenAI service, and let me actually cancel this quickly and navigate to that. Yes, that's fine. So let's go to the OpenAI service because I want to show you what becomes open and available once you've created an OpenAI service. So once we've set up the OpenAI service, you can actually go to the Azure AI Foundry portal. Okay. What that does is it takes you to the portal, and this is where you would build that model that's going to enable the search. Now, this is a playground all on its own. Anyone played with Azure AI Foundry yet? Okay, cool. Awesome. And it's exciting, but it's a lot, hey? Yes, there's a lot happening in the Azure AI Foundry Hub. And as exciting as it is, it's important that, and that's why I'm saying from an Azure perspective, it's definitely the more complicated one, and therefore your more technical people will definitely play around in here, and you'll see in Copilot Studio just how much different it is. So what we want to do in Azure AI Foundry, once you've now created your OpenAI service, right, you come here and you're going to go to deployments. And this is where you would choose the model that you would want your search to utilize. So we chose text embedding 3 large just because it handles text and images really well. But if I click on deploy model, you'll see that you have access to all the models that's currently available. So I think there's, as you can see, I mean, what's that? Is that 11,144 models that you can choose from? That's insane. So for the embeddings is specifically to assist with searching in text and getting context from text. So if I just look at the embedding models, obviously you've got your ADA002, you've got your 3 large, your 3 small, and there's a bunch of others that you can use. I mean, really the world is your oyster. You can make with and do with it just what you want. I chose the 3 large because that's the model that I wanted to use. So obviously you would deploy that model. Once that is deployed, that is the option that pops up. If I just quickly go back to my search service and we click on import and vectorize data, that is the model that we are setting up with our vectorization. So I'll show you, if I jump back to that little JSON snippet where we had the dimensions, and I don't think that slide is up at the moment. I'll go back to it. I'll show you in the index. That's where that model is specified. So let's just quickly choose one here again. And we'll choose our container. And then click next. So the Azure OpenAI service, we choose that one. That's the one that we created. And the model, you'll see that's why the text embedding 3 large is coming up. That's the deployment model that I chose in Azure AI Foundry. Okay. So that's just to consume and understand the context of text, like I've mentioned. So obviously our authentication type, once again, you can choose whatever you want here. I chose the API key. It's just easier for me because what happened was my Azure account is in a different tenant. So because of the API key, I could use it in another tenant as well. So that just makes it easily accessible. And then obviously we acknowledge, and then we go next. This I just leave as default. You can vectorize images. So imagine in my files, I know what the content looks like. So I don't really have images that needs to be vectorized or looked at. So in other words, when I do searches, I don't want or need my model to understand the images But if you have something with statistics or diagrams and the model needs to understand the context of those diagrams, then you would definitely switch this on. However, when you do switch this on, there's another thing I think you need to install. So it's the hub project and another model that you would need to activate. So I didn't do that for these steps. And then obviously, I'm going to leave that unticked and go to the last step. Here, you can enable the semantic ranker, or you can index the fields even further. I just leave it as is. And then you can also schedule how often this vectorization and indexes should run. So you can actually schedule these runs, especially if it's your container is something that gets updated maybe daily or maybe after a few minutes. Then you can definitely let this indexer run so it can index and constantly check the container for whatever is new. So you'll always have the latest context. I'm just doing it once for now because it's for the purpose of this demo. And because I've already set up this indexer and vectorization, I'm not going to complete the steps right now. Cool. I'm just looking at the time. Gosh, it is flying. Cool. But that is everything that you need to set up from an Azure AI perspective or from an Azure perspective. So once we've set all of these things up, and just lastly, I quickly want to show you just the indexes. So once you've done the import and vectorize, it'll bring you to the screen. So in the search service, you can go to indexes and you can see which things you've set up to be vectorized. And you can click on any one of them. And once it's set up, you can actually already start searching in here to see whether it vectorized it correctly. So just looking at this one, I can't remember which one was the CVs and which one was the health. Let's go. How to deal with stress. I'm not stressed, I promise. There we go. So this is perfect. So the fact that it brings stuff up, I know it may look a little bit like gibberish, but you can see all the places in the document that I've uploaded where it's actually found things relating to stress. So that's the top part. And then all these numbers is the vectors that it's created for that specific file. Okay. So there's a lot happening in this file, and that's why I'm grateful a tool like Copilot Studio brings it into natural language, because I most definitely don't want to read this as a result, right? Cool. And you can also see like the total documents, the storage that it's using, all of those kind of things. Okay, so with that said, let's quickly jump over to our Copilot Studio. And now I'm hoping that I'm jumping to the right one. So I'm going to jump in here, and I'm just going to open Copilot Studio in a new tab. So for those who haven't seen it yet, you can see what it initially looks like when you land in the landing page. So for those who haven't played with Copilot Studio before, you would just navigate to copilotstudio.microsoft.com. It will ask you to sign up for a trial license, okay? And then you will be able to kind of do what I'm going to show you to do today. So just on the landing page, you could obviously start creating an agent by describing it, because there's a Copilot for that as well. Of course there is. So I just normally don't tend to that. I'm just waiting for the rest of the screen to load. There we go. So on the home page also, you can see the recent things that you've worked on. But what I like most here is you can explore the existing agent templates. So for me, the best way to always start is start with a template, because with the template, you can see how they've set it up. So when I want to create an agent, I now understand better how to set it up. Okay. So, but for today's example, I'll show you the agent that I've created, which I'll go to the Azure AI Search agent first. So to create an agent, you'd simply click on create. Just now I'm bouncing a little bit, but you would just simply click on new agent. And then you can choose to create a blank agent or from template. I just went with a blank agent. And then in the creation process, and I'll show you this now. In the creation process, initially it would just ask you for the name of the agent. The description is just a pure description for your own sake and whoever is managing the agent to understand what this agent is for. All Orchestration, using generative AI to determine how to respond to users. I generally put this off, especially if you don't want your agent to hallucinate, right? I don't want it to use orchestration, so I generally switch this off. Copilot has this fun thing that it's doing by switching it back on by itself. So that's a fun activity. And another most important part when creating an agent is the instructions bit. So this is the thing that literally tells your agent what role it needs to play. Okay. So I've made it very generic and I've made it a very short sentence, but I've seen people with it feels like pages and pages of instructions for that specific agent. I have asked multiple times to these specific users, do they know if there's a portal or a place where you can go and find a template of those kind of instructions? There isn't, so opportunity for anyone sitting in the crowd. It really would be awesome to have a library of instructions to feed to your agent. But you could easily ask ChatGPT or Copilot to prompt one for you. So what we've done here is we've actually now added knowledge. So when adding knowledge, I could have deployed this agent without any knowledge, right? And just that instruction piece, it would have gone and hallucinated to its heart content about whatever. I could make it in a Yoda tone and it would talk like Yoda as well. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to give my agent some context. In other words, when I ask you something, I want you to be that friend that understands what I mean. Okay. So what we've done is you'll see that I've added 2 knowledge bases here. It's because I've got the 2 indexes. That's why that's important. So if I click on add knowledge, you can see that in Copilot Studio, there's various knowledge sources that you can choose from. You can choose SharePoint, you can choose Dataverse. I actually want to tap into the MCP thing for Copilot Studio for Dataverse because that's very exciting. Come to my next talk. But today we'll deal with Azure AI Search. So obviously, because we've now gone through the process, set it up in Azure AI. The things that we would need if you want to set up an Azure AI Search, if I just click on, obviously I've set the connection up already. But if I wanted to create a new connection, right? I just want to show you what it is that the AI Search connector in Copilot Studio needs to connect to your Azure AI Search thing. Is it would need the endpoint URL. So if I quickly jump back to Azure and I go to the search service, I go to the overview. So I'm in the search service. It needs this URL here. That's the endpoint URL. Okay. Then the second thing that it needs is the Azure AI Search admin key. And you find that also still in the search service, but you go down to settings and you click on keys. Okay. And here you would find the primary admin key and you can just copy this and then you would paste the key in here. Okay. Those are the only 2 things you need to create that connection to your specific Azure AI Search. So once again, imagining, I'm using one AI search service that's been set up, but in a company, there could be 5, 10, 20. So that's why this is important. And then once that connection is set up, you can actually see the indexes that you want to use. So I've added them both to the agent. So you can see both of them are here. Okay. And then what we want to do now is we want to kind of test the agent. So I'm sitting with a container that's got resumes in it, and it's also got the who, like how to deal with stress at work. So let's ask it some questions and hopefully, fingers crossed, it works. So I've got some pre-prompts that worked yesterday. It's like on the safe side, but it could be anything today because it switched itself on to orchestrate. So let's see, list all the candidates with C# skills. And then hopefully, so what I like about Copilot Studio is once you actually run it, you can see what sources it's getting the information from. So it's showing you that, okay, this is the question that it got, and it actually found my CV container, and it started reading from the CVs in there. So based on the CVs that I have listed in that container, these 2 people have some skills in C#. And what I like about this is if you hover over it, you can see that it got the information from the PDF, right? Because many times with the chatbots, when it gives a citation of the information where it got it from the web, which is annoying because you said use this container. Okay. But then I took it a step further and I was like, ooh, let's see what this bot can do with 2 containers. So I was like, how many of the candidates will deal with stress well? So let's look at what it says. Hopefully it's the same answer than yesterday. Work your magic. So let's see what it gives us. Okay. So as you can see, based on the search results, candidates who deal with stress well typically exhibit the following qualities. This is definitely different from the answer that I got yesterday. Fun times, yay. And this is what I love about agents, right? It also learns the type of questions, the more you engage with it. And that's why the journey for each and every individual using an agent and building an agent would be different every time. So yesterday told me that I can't really tell you candidates because we don't deal with stress in their CVs, right? But it could give me tips, and it actually went to the web and it gave me some tips of how to identify stress within candidates. So it's very similar to what it did now, where it says these are kind of the qualities that you need to look for, but you can actually assess this during the interviews, okay? So because of the response that I got yesterday, I was like, okay, what signs should I look out for during an interview? And it kind of like went a step ahead. So I already got this question answered. So then my last question was nothing to do with the candidates, just some recommendations to deal with stress. Because as you can see with this response, it didn't reference anything. So which means it didn't really go to any of the containers to read the information. It just gave the best answer based on the things that I've asked it yesterday. It kind of got to an answer for me. So let's ask what are recommendations to deal with work stress? And my expectation is that it goes to that work stress container that I have with the file before it goes to anything else, right? Let's see. Fingers crossed that this works. It's been doing well so far. I'm very proud of it. Well done, robot. So, and this is something that I really like that Copilot adds as well, is you would have noticed in my instruction, I said only use official resources with a little tick mark. It realized that that is an official resource and it was using only that. So it really is very clever and it's giving me all the pointers that is available in that document. And I'll show you how I know this is because at the citation, when it's done, gosh, it's like really giving it to me today. It's like, you must be very stressed. We need your help. I didn't read the document before, so I don't know how many pointers there are. It helps to read, people. It helps to read. Come on. Okay, it looks like it's reaching a conclusion. So exciting. Okay. And it is referencing. So as you can see, it's building its references. Where does it come from? It comes from my Who Mental Health at Work PDF. So now I know it's using the documents that I pointed it to instead of using its own imagination. It's not going and finding anything from the web, because imagine if you want to point your people to policies. You don't want it to go to the web and find random policies for some other company. You want your people to only find information about policies in your own company. Okay, I'm at time almost. Okay, I can do this. Cool. But yeah, that's building a custom agent. I think I'm going to skip the PowerPoint, the SharePoint one. The SharePoint one gave me a letdown. So I connected it to SharePoint and I asked it something and I got I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. So it wasn't that friend that understands me. So let me quickly jump back to my slides. There we go. So just some, are you clicking? You're not clicking. There we go. Just some key takeaways from today's session is obviously agents need context. If you don't give it context, you can expect any answer, right? It doesn't just need data. It does need that context. It needs to understand, right? And vectorization gives that to it. And then vectorization obviously makes the data understandable, what I've just said. AI search makes this possible. So it helps us to do this. And then Copilot Studio and Azure AI Search, it does equate to smarter agents. So if you can use them together, it really makes everything much simpler. So remember, vectorization is the secret sauce that transforms a chatbot into a real assistant. And that is me. Thank you so much for coming to my talk, everyone. Thank you. I don't know if there is time for questions. No. Okay. That's awesome. Oh, we do have 2 minutes. Okay. Any questions? Yes. Just want to grab a sip of water quickly as well.
Hi.
Hi.
Did you put this into Teams yet?
I have not, but with Copilot Studio, you can publish to Teams. I have not done it for this demo, no.
Okay, and on the back, can you connect to Confluence and SharePoint?
Confluence, I'm not too sure of, but definitely SharePoint. I know you can create your own custom connectors because Copilot Studio is part of the Power Platform. You can set up your own custom. As long as there's an API from Confluence, you would be able to create a connector to that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have an awesome last panel discussion.